When mortals become gods, everything changes. Stuck in the shattered realm, our unexpected heroes look upon the world of Aer'yndor. Fragmented, falling apart. As mortals, they would have been powerless. But as gods, the power to reform the world is in their hands. Our hands.
I want you to think of a choice, one singular moment at the table where your decision shapes an entire universe. This is how The Shattered God ends.
This is Tabling the Narrative, a World Anvil sponsored podcast where we break down how the stories we tell come to life at the table.
We're your hosts. My name is Jen.
And I'm Sage. Coming up next, we take a closer look at the finale of The Shattered God and how the players and their characters decided the fate of the world of Aer'yndor. Then, of course, we have some big questions for the GM of both The Shattered God and our upcoming series Oathfire about how he managed to weave all of our stories together.
For now, let's take a peek into the archive for a look into the final and most important decisions in The Shattered God. An altar sits in the center of the remaining party, chaining together the remaining landmasters drawn into the Shattered Realm. Without hesitation, Helm strikes at a tether, snapping it cleanly before it unravels, freeing a landmass that drifts from the Shattered Realm and disappears. Throg follows, severing other tethers.
Echo realizes that some places cannot be returned without being destroyed, that some losses are permanent. The final tether snaps, and the party understands. The Shattered Realm does not contain many worlds, but one, Aer'yndor, broken, waiting to be made whole again by who else other than the party?
Dar's soul joins the party in its final act to restore the world of Aer'yndor new. As gods, Helm extends his power, his life force, to Echo and Aer'yndor so they can do what must be done.
Aer'yndor extends their memories, their history, and the ancient knowledge once preserved by the fungal people to the world of Aer'yndor, offering freely both this knowledge and the fungal network itself.
Echo follows, easing the strain of what is becoming whole again, and extends an understanding that nature is not separate from the life of mortals, that growth requires cooperation, and healing is a collective act. Echo guides the souls that are no longer trapped by the Shattered One back to the mortal plane, allowing them to return in forms that feel true to who they are.
Gretchen then extends her power to Dar, awakening him for a final choice, a final chance. And in his final breath, Dar gives a single truth to the world of Aer'yndor. The gods will never again walk the world as they once did, will no longer influence the world directly, and mortals will choose their futures without divine influence.
Throg imagines cities raised into light, open places of learning where orcs and elves stand side by side, knowledge replacing blood trials, and libraries replacing battlefields.
Oleg follows, and moved by Dar's truth and sacrifice, relinquishes his divine spark, using it to elevate Lena as the goddess of balance before returning to immortal life.
In the aftermath, Throg steps forward, pressing his helm into Helm's hands, and relinquishes his divinity. Helm then relinquishes his life and divinity to his twin, Irma, and runs, laughing breathlessly, into the hills with Gretchen beside him.
So there's no denying those were some heavy moments. I think it's time we take a look under the table and ask the cast about what really led up to them.
Hello, I'm Ricardo, also known as ttrpg.
Oh, hi. So in the final episode, the characters enter into the Shattered Realm, and after defeating the Shattered God, there's kind of an altar where these tethers are holding land masses of parts of Aer'yndor together. And I was curious because Helm was the first person to step forward and start cutting these tethers before understanding that some of these places may not come back into being and maybe they're gone forever. What is Helm thinking during all of this?
I don't think he was thinking, he was acting, like being productive, right? Well, there's difference between productivity and activity. And he was probably mistaking the two, one for the other, being, oh, I'm going to be productive instead of I got to do something. And so he's like, what can I do? I'm going to go start doing this. And then when somebody smarter said, hey, we should think about this, I was like, oh, I've never had to really think before I did anything.
It's funny because I actually like your explanation because we have been talking a little bit about Helm as a character. And in Mac's interview, we were talking a little bit more about Helm as a character because I think how you do a great job of really embodying the characters that you play. And I found that very inspiring getting to play with you and getting to see Helm's actions. Let me ask you this. Do you think that Helm will ever tell Throg the truth?
I don't think so, because Helm doesn't know what the truth is. And so what he made up in that moment was as good as any truth that he'd ever known.
This is such a good point.
That was his truth.
In the end of the Shattered God, Helm, after becoming a god himself, actually decides to give up his divinity. And I'm curious if you can give us a little bit more of insight into how Helm's backstory plays into this decision to relinquish his divinity.
Helm just wanted to let the world happen, right? However it may, he was always put on a course of somebody else's design or desire. And so instead of, whether it was go to school, be like your sister, that was kind of his attitude was like, the more you tell me what I need to do and what I have to do, the less I'm going to do, only because he didn't want to shoulder that responsibility or burden for anybody else but himself. And so if he's has to take on this divinity or this godhood, as it were, that would mean he would become more responsible to more people. And he's like, I'm not ready for that. Not because he's a bad person, but his personality is very irresponsible.
This makes sense to me. And I remember a lot of this coming up in the temple? And it came up when Helm had to face the trickster god, and really was tempted because he wanted to follow his own path, right? And make those own decisions of his. So it makes sense to me that comes into play here as well.
He's like, that's a big responsibility. And what if I screw it up?
Yeah.
Because he's like, I just want to do my own thing and take care of myself. And whether that's selfish for my own well-being or selfish for others' well-being, I think they're both valid, because it's like, his decision-making is very instinctive versus, what should I be doing? Because he's never going to ask for help.
His character, Helm, is so young. He just, I mean, I would not want to be a god. Like, if all of this happened to me, I'd be like, nah, I'm out of here.
I would be a god.
Of course you would.
Of course you would.
I feel like you've mostly answered this, but does Helm think that Irma is a better fit for this? Does he think that she'll do a better job? Does he care how good of a job she'll do? Or did he kind of just hand this off thinking, okay, well, I'm not going to do it. This is the next best person.
I wouldn't say next best person, the best person he knew, right? It's like, This is Irma's Phoenix, the best human being that we all know. And it's like, he's like, somebody who's going to be responsible, smart, thoughtful, patient, all the things she was when he was growing up. But one thing I did change is at the end there, when he gave up his spark, he made Irma his twin sister as opposed to his older sister.
Oh, and that's right. That was in our notes.
So that was a little mischievous because, she was always very thoughtful, patient, and, not the kind of person to be telling him what to do, but he was like, this is the right person for this job. But he always, always growing up thought he's like, would things be different if they were the same age or if he was older?
I am Sean, better known online as Teleron.
My first question is, we had a very kind of very tragic ending to Dar's ending itself, right? I wouldn't even necessarily say that that Dar ascended to full godhood, because that chance was robbed of him when he died. And my question for you is, what was going through your mind and his mind as Dar was dying and going through this process?
Just before that, it was more of like there's no point in trying to attack this guy. It's not going to do anything. I'm on death's doorstep here, or at least going unconscious. I had a couple hits left, and he was attacking after anybody did anything. And then, like, as he was dying, it was just we need to stop this. We need to do something. And I have a drink that will help with that, even if it means the end.
Yeah. So for Dar, you mentioned in not going toward Helm's home when we were at that sort of crossroads, we missed the one opportunity that we kind of had to pursue Lena's attackers. And so I'm kind of wondering, during Dar's death, is this some regret that he had?
Oh yeah, I don't know what exactly he would have done when he'd gotten there, but that was one huge one, not being able to go there and find the people that did that.
Yeah, man, that scene was so intense for me. I'm pretty sure I cried. You did such a great job during this episode of explaining Dar's backstory and going into more depth about why this final what led up to this final moment for Dar. And we did ask, of course, if there was anything unexplored about your backstory. But I think that you covered it very, very well, which is why I recommend anyone watching or listening to us to go check out The Shattered God in its entirety, but specifically that final episode, the very ending of that finale there, if you're interested in learning a little bit more about what leads up to Oathfire. So my next question for you is this. There was a lot. So Gretchen ends up in the finale raising up Dar's spirit so that Dar can make this final decision in influencing the reshaping of this new Aer'yndor. Can you explain to all of us what the connection here is between Gretchen and Dar?
Well, they were, wasn't it? Gretchen was given basically the power that Dar would have gotten, but it was too much for Gretchen kind of thing. And we had to split the power. And that was Fear and Hope, I believe.
Yeah, I wondered. So I feel like when I was playing the game and going through and the pilgrims kind of entered the temple, in my mind, almost immediately I had this feeling that Dar, with kind of these visions that he was having, is there a connection there? Like, did Dar have some sort of pre-insight or premonition into the pilgrims themselves?
I don't know. Just all I was told was to find the ranger.
That's right.
Dar, like in behind the scenes and everything, all I knew is that pilgrim one was going to have a bit more of an impact on Dar's story. I didn't know anything about it. Dar didn't know anything either.
Yeah. Again, the Shattered God was, I feel like there was so much content in the series, and we were in such a short time constraint that so much was unexplored, and there's so much depth behind it. So I'm glad that we've had the chance to overview some of it. I do have another question for you specifically related to Dar's decision after, in Dar's final choice, final breath, final chance to reform Aer'yndor. Dar decides to extend this new truth that this is, in my opinion, one of the biggest decisions that was made in the Shattered God as a whole, because Dar decided that the gods would no longer influence the mortal realm,
directly.
at least directly, right? And so, why did Dar make this decision? What influenced this? Where did this really come from?
Because seeing this god popping up and these other gods, like, it seems like these few people could just all of a sudden go, no, we're going to mess things up for everybody. And he doesn't like that can just happen. Doesn't like that it's just on the whim of these gods. And he doesn't even know anything about these gods. Like, to him, they're just people with power. Like,
right.
He didn't understand what gods were at the beginning of this. So it was just like, these crazy, powerful people can just like, oh, I'm going to come up and destroy the earth. Or I'm going to come up and screw with these people. And he doesn't want that happening. Later, after the episode, we had made kind of amendment that they can influence stuff if needed. They can get together and everybody has to agree that they can step in.
I think that makes sense narratively to make that kind of amendment to Dar's decision here. Oh, man. After talking with the cast about their gods' decisions, it's pretty clear to me that moments like these are where a lot of stories either come together or completely and utterly just fall apart.
Yeah, because once things start branching out, if you don't have a way to track it all, it just devolves into absolute chaos.
Which you're totally right. And I think that makes this the perfect place to bring up that this episode of Tabling the Narrative is sponsored by World Anvil.
If you're building a world, writing a story, or running a campaign, worldanvil.com gives you an amazing way to organize everything. Your lore, your characters, timelines, all in one place.
One thing I love personally as a big note taker is how World Anvil lets you connect everything so naturally. So instead of just having these isolated notes, your world actually feels structured.
Yeah, I get what you're saying about that. My notes are not structured. But if you want to try out, World Anvil, you can use our code GHOSTLIGHT for 51% off any yearly membership.
Once again, we've got a link for you right at the top of the description. So definitely check it out if you're working on your own world. And now that I think about it, we're also building Aer'yndor on World Anvil as well. So if you want to go, explore it yourself.
Okay, so I am Mac the Axe.
Jack.
Did you have anything you wanted to start with?
Will there be soup?
I feel like the soup, it's come up so much during this podcast. I don't think anybody knows anything about the soup clip. So I volunteer Ghost to insert a soup clip at some point during this in this podcast.
And then, without warning, she appears. Dar, you feel a tug on your cloak. And as you look down, you see a tiny halfling, curly-haired girl, maybe 7, and her head tilted. And she says, "Are you statues?"
No.
"Are you alive?"
Look down and touch their chest.
I think so.
"Can you eat?
What is that?
Do you sleep? Why is your face like that?" If I knock on you, will you go dong?
I don't think I eat.
And then, almost like she didn't even care what the answer was, she turns and looks at Aer'yndor and says, "Can you talk to other mushrooms?"
Yes. Yes.
Do they tell you secrets? You smell like soup.
I'll lean over and try to sniff.
They smell like soup.
What is soup?
So we just interviewed Goldie and Tuleron, and I know we talked to each of you guys individually about your relationship with each other throughout the Shattered God. I guess my question is there anything either of you want to ask the other about the way that your relationship developed?
Well, I have a couple things that kind of go along with that, right?
Yeah.
So, like, the initial finding out that y'all had anything to do with each other. In that moment, how was Oleg feeling about being revealed to his party? How did Dar, how was he connecting the dots? So let's talk about that moment.
First, it was kind of the real first thread that Dar had found about who had done this. And yeah, trying to kind of piece things together and realizing, though, somebody that I've been traveling with, it was only a few weeks or something at the time, or not super long, has something to do with this. So first it was just surprising, and I'm not gonna lie, anger had started to rise in him as well. He didn't really know what the extent of your involvement was, but knowing that you had some connection to the people who had done it.
Oleg definitely felt exposed in that moment. It wasn't a past that he liked to be known. So when Solaris, who is the opposing god to the god he initially served, appeared and revealed him in all his lack of glory, definitely probably felt exposed in front of people, and he already had an inferiority complex since we were just saying how he was the junior member of the Knights of Lua, joining just about the same time that Dar came into being. I, as a player, noticed that Dar and Oleg shared a backstory when Trueveil was first mentioned, but I don't think Oleg realized up until the moment Dar directly asked him about Lena. in the village. I can't remember the village's name.
I can't either. Ghost insert it here.
The answer is Brackenford.
I'm sorry.
That like Dar had intended to, when we had stayed in that inn or whatever, Dar had intended to go have a conversation with you, but then that attack happened and we had to go fight them. And during the attack, it was one of the realizations of, oh, like with whatever journey we're on, I definitely will need help.
It led to one of my favorite parts of the campaign where we did the tag team move, and at least moments involving Oleg. That was tied for my favorite.
Yeah, that tag team was awesome. Because it was right in amongst the whole, like, am I gonna have to go after this guy, or like what? How is he involved? Am I gonna have to do something that I don't want to? But there's a greater issue going on right now, and we need to work together. Had that attack not happened, I don't know where the conversation would have gone. Probably very differently, but
Yeah, in a longer campaign, I think they might have not necessarily bonded, but had more of an arc regarding that moment.
Goldie, what did you feel? I don't remember if I asked you this question the other day. What did you feel when Dar died? Like, what was going through like your head as a player, but also just how would Oleg have felt about this?
As a player, it was a very touching moment, and one of the kind of things that you play these kinds of games for.
Yeah.
We collected all those items, went for all those sessions, and then that was the climax, which was quite satisfying. I think as a player, you always kind of want your character to have a cool moment like that. So it was very nice for Dar to get that. But as a character, I had previously decided when Dar wanted Lena to be saved that he would do everything in his power to help in that. But the moment that Dar is gone, he knows it's just down to him to fulfill Dar's wish.
Yeah. Good point. So, in our individual interview with you, you mentioned that Oleg. So, we were. Okay. So, you mentioned in your individual interview that Oleg, in relinquishing his divinity, just kind of went back to this mortal life. And on the other hand, we have Dar's original kind of intent was to go after the attackers of the farm. Do you think, Goldie, that this is something that Oleg would have gone to do before just returning to his farm? Or do you think that after this whole thing that he just kind of wanted to go back to that piece of life?
I think Oleg would have gone for a similar kind of approach towards the end. It was the Caldwin's wishes that he didn't keep, his weapons that he didn't keep, living a life similar to the one he had lived up to that point. I don't know whether that would have had friction between him and Dar or not, but I would like to think he would think it wouldn't be worth it. He'd want to do it. He'd want to go and attack them and seek retribution, but that's the whole reason they attacked Fruvale in the first place, because of actions he'd done against them.
This is such a good point. I love that. It's a shame that Hal could not make it because I had some questions between Hal and Throg, and I really wanted to see you two talk about some things.
I have one for Mac.
Yeah,
Okay.
please.
Yeah.
Was Helm his first ever true friend?
I think actually yes. Helm was Frog. Whatever my character's name is, inserted here.
The answer is Throg.
Yeah. I do think that Helm was probably the first person he considered friend because he was coming from strictly orc to being with the other races, and Helm was kind of, and like we found out later, it was Helm just taking advantage of him. But I do think that there was Like as far as Throg knew, that was his one friend, his truest friend there.
This kind of brings something up for me from Throg's perspective. First of all, like, why was Helm like his first friend if he grew up in Thrakel, and what in Thrakel, just what in general was that culture like?
I think from what I was imagining, Thrakel was like almost the completely opposite of every other city. Being the orcs, and we touched on how his tribe was one of the few tribes that actually wanted to work with the other races to survive. I think a lot of it was survival of the fittest. You know, very harsh. You had to be the best. To be the best, you had to eliminate anyone else. But I think it was with Throg's tribe in particular, because when we actually went there and found them in that village, there was such a large population. I think it was it was just starting to kind of civilize. And I don't think that it was always like that. I think it was actually like that before, because we found a whole city. You know, we found the whole city underground. And then once that city got taken over, they kind of went tribal, and we're going to do anything to survive, survival of the fittest, call out the weak. And a lot of the growing up stuff was probably more pertained to that.
There were things about Elim's backstory that I don't think I ever told you, that we had discussed, Jen and I, when we were doing our own interviews. So Elim comes from a very preserved, isolated society, probably one of the oldest societies in Aer'yndor that really existed. The fungal people's objective was to keep and preserve ancient and arcane knowledge. And there's a history here that Ghost and I discussed in the background. So the fungal people were kind of, in my opinion, allied with some of the orcs in the beginning. They were very close. There's the fungal society is obviously very deep underground, very, like, much closer to the core than to the surface. And Elim hated Throg. At the whatever empathy or feeling or emotion Elim really had in meeting Throg, Elim hated him, because in our histories, the Orcish people were expanding and ended up leaving this more isolated society or alliance they kind of had, and left and ended up expanding into the surface world, where they established like Golvathar and some of their like original cities, right? And then obviously there's this whole history of Golvathar's massacre and the aftermath of that. So I never told you these things, and it never came up in our backstories, but Elim had an enmity against Throg in the very beginning, and was incredibly uncomfortable with orcs, because the entire fungal society saw the outside world as something to protect against. And so it was kind of a betrayal for them, for the orcs to leave and expand and adventure and explore into this external world. So Elim had this entire perspective on the orcs in the very beginning, and throughout the Shattered God, this kind of expanded into, not expanded, but transitioned into something more kind of. I think Throg changed Elim's perspective on orcs. There were several moments throughout the series that we talked about in our individual interviews. And I think one of the things was Elim's entire perspective was on protecting knowledge and protecting home. And the ancient, histories that were there. And Throg has such a protective nature. I think not only did he change Elam's perspective on orcs as a whole, especially in their alliance of protecting this world, but I think Throg also influenced Elam in starting to see outsiders and people who live above ground and other mortals as something to need protection as well. So anyway, I never shared those things with you. And I just realized it. But there was so much history that we didn't get to explore there that would have been really interesting between Throg and Elam.
That actually kind of explains the one reaction then, because when Helm changed Throg's memory from it being they were driven out of Goldogar, Elam had a very, very interesting reaction, because they were not influenced by Helm when Throg was.
Yeah, Elam used, I think it was the mark of the Whispering Mind to notice this interaction between them and use the mark to, and their knowledge ability to recall the real truth behind Golvathar's massacre. And in our individual interviews, it was a question that Jin actually asked about what Elam was thinking during this moment, and if Elam had considered at all of telling Throg or anyone. And I immediately said no. We talked about a lot.
I do have some general questions for everybody to kind of answer. But before I get there, is there anything else that anybody else has thought of during the last 20 minutes before we move on?
What does Echo do once it's all over?
That is a great question. At the end of the Shattered God, well, someone's wish made it to where he couldn't interact with the world too much. But the being and the god that he is, made it to where he still has some, maybe a little bit more influence in the world than other gods, just because he's granting the wishes and stuff like that of those who are passing through the veil, right? He's paying attention to who do you want to have a little blessing, stuff like that. So he has a little bit more leeway with stuff because he's granting the hopes and wishes of those who are passing. Not of everybody, right? I highly doubt it's every single person. Probably those who led decent lives or died in particularly cruel ways, at least stuff like that, not oh, I was a murderer and killed 500 people, I want this whole city to burn. No, I'm not going to grant that. I'm sorry. It's just no. So I would like to think if he had the ability to visit people in their dreams type thing, he might have said goodbye to Trill. Because she did ask him, am I going to see you again? And I was just because the way that his relationship with Trill was, they were friends, right? But there was the potential for romance if it ever kind of fit. And whenever she said that to him before he left through the portal, he was like, I'm about to there's this battle with women, worst times. Why would that's kind of his mood in that moment. Seriously, I gotta, but it's okay, bye. He just left. I was that was the worst timing. I feel like he would, want to tell her, even though everyone probably knew with the reforming of the world, it was the new gods were kind of known a little bit maybe. But I feel like he would have met with her once just to kind of say goodbye and stuff like that. Other than that, trying to uphold the values that he purposefully tried to get her to see in what her role could be. So just trying to do that forever. One of the questions I want to ask, so Throg, since he gave up his divinity, right? I don't know if you discussed this with Ghost or if I just missed it or something. So you might know. If you know, then you can tell me. If not, then it's going to be a Ghost question for whenever we talk to him. So is he like forever frozen in his current age because of his godhoodness and like because he is the god of war that will only put the helmet on when, and I mean elves live a long time, so I mean you could just, that would make it to where y'all could stay together longer, right? And or is it something that is passed down through your bloodline now as who's gonna kind of take over the helmet if it becomes to pass that it is needed?
I think it's a bloodline thing. If it's needed, it's going to be somebody in his bloodline to, since, I mean, that's kind of what it was based on to begin with. You know, he did not get to get into the thing without his bloodline. But we briefly talked about, Ghost and I briefly talked about it, and I think everybody was involved, actually, because I think it was when we were still all in a session. We talked about like a half-elf, half-orc descendant coming out in the future, like a future campaign, having to take up the mantle again. There is a little bit of life suspension to match the elf. I was thinking more along the lines of it wasn't that he was a god because he did put all the god powers into the helmet, but it was more along the lines of the classical Lord of the Rings, give up half your life for the other.
Elrond.
Oh no.
What
Yes.
Elrond do?
Afterward, this is such a good question. So Elrond rules over the like realm of knowledge that is currently unreachable by the mortals in Aer'yndor. I just imagine that Elrond is overwatching, just consuming as much information as possible, spending time in their libraries. Honestly, I imagine it to be very similar as to what Elrond did when they lived within the fungal network in their home.
Nice.
Just reading lots of books.
Pretty much, yeah.
How does that work in Aer'yndor? Are they part of like a hive mind and then they separate a mushroom off to go and be an individual for a while and then reconnect? Or is it, are they all individuals part of a network?
It's so crazy that you said that because Jen had the same question. So I imagine it kind of like the connections that the Myconans and Dungeons and Dragons have, but it's not a hive mind network. There's just information that's easily like able to pass throughout the network. And so this is kind of what Elrond extended into the rest of the world, which allows them to communicate, anywhere. But it also opens up the avenue for other fungrals to go out into the world and explore rather than staying isolated in their home.
This question came up, I believe, in the interview with Hal. I'm not 100% sure. One of the interviews with one of you, so one of you might already know what it is, but I think it was Hal. So if all of this would have happened to you and not your character, would you have chosen the same like avatar, or like would you have wanted to be a god or not? Like do the Mac thing, the Mac, like thing? Would you have left? Would you have wanted to be a god? Like what you got?
Depends what it's the god of.
We wouldn't have made it to the ending if it happened to me.
Oh no, I'd be dead.
Yeah.
We'd all be dead. Let's
I think that would be the whole thing is like, yeah, we wouldn't have made it to the end.
What do you mean? Which avatar would we have chosen? What decision would we have made? We wouldn't have lived that long. Like all of us would be dead before we got in Golbathar. We would have died outside.
Listen, we wouldn't have gotten out of the Crystal City.
No.
We would have died right in that council chamber, but we wouldn't have even got down to the library.
Let's just pretend that we would have survived. I would have totally become a god. I would have been fine with that.
But before we head off, we're going to look under the other side of the table to ask a few crucial questions to our GM, Ghost, the mastermind behind the Shattered God. Sage, I'm going to hand it over to you where you can ask Ghost questions.
Why, thank you, Jen. No, I just have a few general questions for you. I just am curious about your perspective and your processes as a GM during the Shattered God. First of all, can you tell us a little bit about your whole process in creating the Shattered God? What was your basis for this idea? How did you kind of run with it, structure things? Just give us a breakdown of that.
Yeah. So I think the idea for the Shattered God came during. There was always this idea of like gods that was kind of unanswered. Knowing that the world was homebrew, like, and being like, oh, I can do whatever I want. I like this idea of like, oh, well, the players create the gods, and so I started thinking about like, what does that look like? As you move forward through these, like this world that's just a hodgepodge of one shots. As players, need things, we make them for this world. And then we came to one of our players, JC, created this rogue who had this dagger, and we talked about what the dagger meant for him. And he had a really big backstory about the dagger. And I like this idea that like, all right, well, the dagger was connected to him. And I like the idea of the goddess of death having this dagger, like urge him to send souls to her. And so my first initial concept for Nazara was sort of like malicious entity that was kind of, cruel and wanted souls and like underworldly kind of things. And later I kind of retconned a little bit because I felt like that was a little bit too cliche for that particular type of character. But really the idea of, we had set up this like backstory of the Wraith of Draymore. It was like a fairy tale that parents used to tell their kids at night to make them go to bed or whatever. And the idea that it was this real life person who was almost going through an addiction with using this knife. The more he used it, the more power he got. And so he hadn't used it in a long time. So in that one shot of the Silent Tide, we saw sort of the gods returning to Earth. The first one shot, A Dance of Hidden Blades, introduced the idea of Nixarath, this god who has been, cast out. And what did that mean for this world? And so this is all sort of building on that. But, the idea that this was happening was sort of waking the gods of this world that were mostly hands off because of this big thing that happened with Nixarath, this big first sin. They sort of regressed into their corners of the world. But with that Kraken that reached up and grabbed Eli, this character, and pulling him under, the idea that he would then ask him to be his champion. Like, what could that be? Like, that was sort of the heart of it. Like, what could that be? Like, if a god chose a champion, what could we do with that? We had some of the elements that started to kind of come into play when we started the Ashes of Tomorrow one shot, where I was introducing the idea of some gods. And I love that we got a chance to kind of call back to that at the end of the Shattered God, but the idea that these gods were actively seeking champions. And so why are they seeking champions? Well, they must be trying to defend themselves. Like, no one is going to come out of hiding, something like that. Like, these gods are kind of selfish. Like, they're not going to come out of hiding unless their own hides are at stake. So how would that occur? Well, we had the idea that the star fell in Vralith a long time ago, and I didn't really have a plan for what that meant. It just was kind of cool looking on a map, so I put it there. So the idea that this outside influence landed in the world, and it was this other eldritch being, this divine thing from another realm that came here and just wanted to spread like a virus and take over what was already here. That seemed like a good reason to wake the gods up. So in the Silent Tide, we saw the gods starting to wake up. In Ashes of Tomorrow, we started seeing some lore around the gods. We had Atheris coming in, this monastery that was devoted to Atheris, and they needed this phoenix egg to complete this life cycle, which brought the idea of avatars. That whole one shot was supposed to set up. Zyphoros was there, like the cat was in the beginning of that one. I don't know if you remember that, Sage. That cat was running around in that one shot way back then. So we had a few gods could have chosen champions in that one shot, but it didn't happen. So I love the idea of, all right, well, yeah, that played out a certain way. We've had some reoccurring characters, some familiar faces, and a lot of the players involved in this are attached to those characters. They asked for us to have a tragic, but not necessarily difficult story in the beginning. So what's the most tragic thing I can do is attack the thing that they're attached to. So let's assign each of their players or those former player characters a god and then just instantly destroy them. So instead of having this big hero moment of you are chosen by the gods, go forth and take this quest, it was, oops, like we chose people and they lost. Now, like, can you all help us maybe?
Oh, man. So for clarity's sake, for anyone watching or listening to us, one of my characters was one of those avatars that died in the beginning of the Shattered God. I think I was like on the verge of tears while playing the Shattered God. I was like, oh man, that was it.
And that's part of the fun of the lore too.
Yeah.
And he killed Lily right after that.
Yeah. So we give that a little, and that was really just a spur of the moment thing. I didn't really intend that whole thing to happen, but it just seemed like it would hit hard. But like there's something to that, like having your, like all of you, for the most part, were outsiders in some way, shape, or form coming into this. Like Oleg was this misfit who didn't really fall in line with his group. You all were completely new to the area. So was Dar. You had Helm, who like was sort of like the reluctant diplomat, like you had this sort of like misfitty kind of backstory. So then to give it something to root it into emotion, with Lily going the way that she did, especially seeing how everyone reacted to her. This is kind of a spur of the moment thing, but it's something that like I loved even going into that last episode. And I think for me, I was when you went into the Shattered Realm, the ultimate bad guy at the, because I told you all to choose choose the way that they came up, how they appeared, how the Shattered God appeared. And then when at some point they were going to come back together and that ultimate bad guy was going to be Lily, but Sage, you chose Lily to be.
Yeah, I did.
So we just kept it the way it was. Like it just sort of happened. And then Dar had that fantastic ending, so we didn't have to worry about it all coming together, and it all kind of worked out.
I love how it happens like that. Everyone just makes decisions. I personally, as one of your players, and I think I've probably told you this before, but one of the things that I enjoy and have enjoyed the most about playing with you is how much you do allow us as players to have our characters make our own decisions and create the story as we go. I think as a GM during the Shattered God, you did a phenomenal job with that. I don't think along the way, there were maybe a few things that I was curious about. Okay, what would have happened otherwise? There was clearly a plan for this, but then you're very good about on the spur of the moment being like, okay, we're twisting, we're going to go do something else. Let me do this. And it ends up being something cohesive anyway. You do an excellent job about that.
Well, thank you. I do a lot of writing in advance for the start. Like I like the idea that when we start sessions, it's like stepping into a fantasy novel. I do a lot of scripted descriptions and stuff in the beginning, but things always fall off the rails. So you've got to adjust where you can. But I love following the story because y'all just are constantly throwing. It's not even curveballs at me. Sometimes it's just curveballs at one another, and it's just fun to watch.
Yeah, it definitely was that. All right, so I have a couple of other questions for you. As a GM, what was your favorite part about GMing the Shattered God?
Oh my goodness. Well, you all really. Just like getting a chance to hang out with you every other day, every other week, and like telling stories and seeing all the interesting ways that it went. You know, like you all are a phenomenal group, especially when it comes to role play. Like, you know, some people might just be like looking at their sheet or just like not like be more mechanical, but you all are just like, you dive right into the scene. And I really do feel like it's like we're putting on this big production, this performance together. And it's just a lot of fun to be in a group with other people who are just as invested in the story as you, who are just willing just to put it all out there and see where things fall. And I think that was my favorite part of doing this. And that's really what like motivated me to go back every other week and to do it. So thank you all for that. It was such like an amazing experience.
So kind of, if the Shattered God had been a longer series, what would you have done differently as a GM?
Oh gosh, if we had much more time,
yes,
we would still be in Lunestra. Like, just for two reasons. Reason number one, like I know y'all, and if you know, given the opportunity to sit in a room, have your character sit in a room and role play, like we'll just do that for multiple sessions.
Yes.
But also just the opportunity to like there's so much, because again, you don't know what the players are going to do. There's so much that you write for the different areas to be explored, but we're on such a tight schedule that like we're trying to get to the finish line, right? We didn't really have a lot of chance to sit in any one spot and explore it too much. So we're getting these like really broad strokes of like Elthwyn and Golvathar and Brackenford, but we're not exploring those areas, getting to know those NPCs. There wasn't a ton of NPCs, which, you know, it's a good and a bad thing. Like certainly there's this high stakes dire thing happening in this world. So like, why would you sit around and talk to a bunch of people while, you know, people are dying in the other side of the world? But like, you might ask a few questions, you know?
Right. I just have one final question for you, Ghost.
Okay.
Very well placed at the end here. What did you feel in ending the Shattered God? What, as a person, as a GM, what was that like to end this whole series? Well, mini series.
Well, it was, you know, I've always had a problem with what you all have known, because you've played in my one shots before, like ending things on time, like actually keeping to a schedule and being like, this is it. You know, you feel accomplished. I felt accomplished in that, like, hey, we did it on the time frame that we wanted to. It was like obviously sad because like you've spent time with these characters and like their ending is so like, part of the thing I like about this world is like you could always come back and play these characters, and that's absolutely true. If you ever wanted to play these characters again, we could figure something out, but it just makes it much more difficult when they're like a god, like looking down in the world, and the rules that they have made it so that they can't interact with it, you know?
Yeah, no kidding.
So like you feel sad for the moment, but you're also sad that like, you know, you're not going to see all these people that you've been hanging out with, your friends that you've been just spending all this time with for the last few months. You're not going to see them every other week. I mean, I knew that most of you had already signed up for Oathfire, so like I knew I'd see you again soon, but we were taking a big break.
Yes.
But like it's sort of the end. It's like closing a chapter on the world, and that's kind of sad too, because you have like not just like the party, but like everyone who joined us along the way and finding some sort of closure to their stories as well. And that whole thing is it's sad, but like in kind of a beautiful way.
Yeah, no, I think I'd feel the same way. I think I kind of do feel the same way. And we are going to talk a little bit more about this and kind of how all of this leads up to Oathfire, some Oathfire type things in our next interview with you. So thank you so much for answering all of our other questions. And I don't know about you, Jen, but I'm really excited to see what your answers are to the next questions we have when we see you again.
I'm excited to figure out what those answers might be.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Tabling the Narrative, where we talked about everything you need to know about the Shattered God going into our upcoming series, Oathfire.
I have to admit, I'm a little sad to leave the Shattered God behind us, but I am more excited to see what is coming up next for the world of Aer'yndor. Next episode, we'll switch our focus to the story of Oathfire, meet up again with our GM Ghost, and greet the cast behind a whole new narrative.
We hope to see you there. Okay, bye!